Today's story is a little different compared to the ones you're used to seeing on this channel, but believe me, it is just as horrific, because the inhumane crimes in this case were committed by renowned scientists in broad daylight. When Hisashi Ouchi arrived at the University of Tokyo hospital after being exposed to the highest level of radiation of any human in history, doctors were stunned. He had no immune system and would soon be forced to stay alive for 83 days in a dead body. But what led to this horrific and inhumane incident? Keep watching to know everything about the man who remained alive in his dead body for almost 3 months. Scientists all over the world have always been very keen on the matter of radiation, ever since it was discovered and used as a nuclear weapon. They have done a lot of research to find out its impact on living beings. All through these years, it was primarily focused on animals, as it was deemed to be unethical to carry out the testing on humans. The world has witnessed major nuclear attacks, like the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the Second World War, and the meltdown of nuclear power plants. However, the impact of radiation on humans could not be tested. On September 30th, an incident at a nuclear fuel processing facility 110 kilometers northeast of Tokyo began when workers inadvertently set off a nuclear chain reaction. They overloaded the sedimentation tank with 16 kilograms of uranium, 7 times the amount approved for the procedure. That was enough to unleash a runaway chain reaction, which plant workers were finally able to halt 18 hours later. Early reports of an explosion that released radioactive material were false, and radiation levels quickly returned to normal once the reaction ceased. In the 1999 Tokaimura nuclear accident, several scientists got first-hand experience studying the victims of the major exposure to radiation. The case of Hisashi Ouchi stands out, who was one of the 3 employees of the Tokaimura nuclear plant impacted by accident. Hisashi Ouchi was working at the Tokaimura nuclear power plant in Japan as a lab technician, and he became popular ever since the radiation accident took place in 1999. Ouchi was born in Ibaraki and had 1 sibling. He was married, and the couple shared a young son together. He was also very fond of rugby in his school days. The incident occurred because of the reactor Joyo. Hisashi Ouchi and his colleagues were accountable for creating fuel for the fast reactor. You see, the plant was commissioned in 1988 and processed up to 3 tons per year of uranium, enriched up to 20% U-235, which is very enriched uranium, more than what is usually permissible. Furthermore, the kind of enriched uranium that was in use at this power plant was also a much higher enrichment level than usual for ordinary power reactors, and it uses a wet process. The power plant location in Tokaimura was ideal due to the abundant land space, and it led to a whole campus of nuclear reactors, research institutes, fuel enrichment, and disposal facilities. Ultimately, 1/3 of the city's entire population would rely on the rapidly growing nuclear industry in the Ibaraki prefecture northeast of Tokyo. There is not much information available in the public domain relating to Ouchi's education, even though his job was very technical in nature. On September 30th, 1999, another technician, Masato Shinohara, was pouring a uranyl nitrate solution into the mixing tank straight from a steel bucket, and it was the 7th such bucket of the solution to be added. Eventually, criticality occurred in the mixing tank, leading to an exothermic reaction, and all 3 men witnessed a blue flash of light, which is known as a Cherenkov radiation. And in that instant, the 3 people realized that something horrible had happened and tried to flee immediately, but none of them got too far. After the explosion, the plant was evacuated, and Hisashi Ouchi, along with his colleagues, were taken to the National Institute of Radiological Science in Chiba. They had all been directly exposed to the radiation, but because of their proximity to the fuel, each of them was irradiated to different degrees. Ouchi was exposed to about 17 sieverts of radiation. Normal background radiation produces a dose of about 2 to 4 millisieverts annually, and doses of more than 5 sieverts have typically been fatal. 8 is enough to kill you. Ouchi's exposure was the most radiation that any human being had ever suffered. He had been in immediate pain and could barely breathe. By the time he arrived at the hospital, he had already vomited violently and fallen unconscious. Hisashi Ouchi's radiation burns covered his entire body, and his eyes were leaking blood. Most dire was his lack of white blood cells, hence the absence of an immune response. Doctors placed him in a special ward to prevent infection and assess the damage to his internal organs. 3 days later, he was transferred to the University of Tokyo Hospital, where revolutionary stem cell procedures would be tested. Ouchi's first week in intensive care involved countless skin grafts and blood transfusions. Cell transplant specialist Hisashi Ouchi next suggested a revolutionary approach that had never been tried on radiation victims before: stem cell transplants. These would rapidly restore Ouchi's ability to generate new blood. This approach would be much faster than bone marrow transplants, with Ouchi's sister donating her own stem cells. Disturbingly, the method appeared to work before Ouchi returned to a state of near death. Photographs of Hisashi Ouchi's chromosomes show them completely decimated. The profuse amount of radiation coursing through his blood eradicated the introduced cells, and images of Hisashi Ouchi show that the skin grafts could not hold because his DNA couldn't rebuild itself. After a week of treatments, Ouchi cried, "I can't take it anymore, I'm not a guinea pig." But at his family's insistence, the doctors continued their experimental treatments even as his skin began to melt from his body. Hisashi Ouchi's body was so far gone that when his gauze was changed, it took 3 hours, and the room had to be heated because his body could not maintain its own heat, and the bandage that was taken off was weighed to measure how much fluid he had lost through the tissues, so they would know how much to give him. Then on Ouchi's 59th day in the hospital, he had a heart attack. But his family agreed that he should be resuscitated in case of death, so the doctors revived him. He would eventually have 3 heart attacks in 1 hour. With his DNA obliterated and brain damage increasing every time he almost died, Ouchi's fate had long been sealed. Only a merciful final cardiac arrest due to multi-organ failure on December 21, 1999, released him from the unbreakable and cruel pain. The moral implications of keeping what could best be described as a husk of a man alive for 83 days do not need to be stated. By keeping Ouchi alive for 83 days, the doctors of the University of Tokyo Hospital did the opposite of what they are trained to do: limit human suffering. As a result, Ouchi's case goes down in the history books as a show of cruelty for the sole reason of research. Ouchi was practically living inside a dead body, and he did so for 83 days. It is also said that Hisashi Ouchi's family was never truly informed of the hopelessness of his situation, or how he had received more than twice the dose of radiation that is fatal to human beings. Shinohara, the least affected of the two who received a deadly radiation dose, lasted 7 months in hospital, until April 27, 2000. The technician died of lung and liver failure along with a long battle against the effects of the radiation he endured. During his 7-month stay at the University of Tokyo Hospital, several skin grafts, blood transfusions, and cancer treatments were performed on him with minimal success. Shinohara's time at the University of Tokyo Hospital was considerably less painful than Ouchi's. As for the supervisor of the 2 deceased workers, Yokokawa was released after 3 months of treatment. He had suffered minor radiation sickness and survived, but he faced criminal charges of negligence in October of 2000. Meanwhile, JCO would pay $121 million to settle 6,875 compensation claims from affected locals. The nuclear power plant in Tokaimura continued to operate under a different company for more than a decade until it shut down automatically during the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. It has not operated since. A book was also written about the ordeal that Hisashi Ouchi went through after he had been in the accident. Because he was in the hospital for about 83 days after being exposed to radiation, it is called a slow death, 83 days of radiation sickness. Hisashi Ouchi's name is also sometimes reported as Hiroshi, and he was 35 years old at the time of the incident. Do you think the doctors should have just let him die? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for your regular dose of whodunits. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Until then, don't get any crazy ideas.